Yep, correct.
Thank you, Daisy.
Yep.
All right, commissioners, now's the time. We're not in a hurry to take a vote. Just talk through as much as we want to.
One issue I see is if we do pass this and then don't go forward with the subdivision plan, then we have to transfer the eligibilities back or come up with a different layout. I don't know.
That's a chance that they take, moving them.
And when or if they do get moved to another location, then it'd be according to whatever rules we have.
If we
will
change
set
the
in
rules, they'll
future,
have to go by the new rules.
Right.
I guess, my earlier question for Mike and then Wendy, I wasn't following the subdivision getting triggered by 3 lots, just because usually we move these eligibilities and we never hear from them again because
Yeah, 1 or
it's a
2 at a
single
time.
lot or maybe 2. I guess I'm probably against it, so that's where I'm gonna be.
Yeah, it's a hard one. It's when you start, so what is so listed on the picture, right? There's track 1 through 3, which were the initial 3 that were moved there, and I'm looking at the picture of the Poppins edition, right? Just for reference, and then there's tracks 4 through 7. So those I'm assuming are all currently just listed as agriculture. So then the process to build on that, since there is a building eligibility, do you just come to the county to exercise the building eligibility?
So lot 4 through 7 don't exist right now.
Those are the ones that if we transfer these 4, that's what
Yes.
Correct.
that's what it will become,
That's right.
Yes.
right?
That's what it represents, right?
However, this has been up since 2020.
So it's like if we rezone something, we could say it's gonna be rezoned to this, but then they can use it they can replat them or move anything around, don't have to stick to that sign.
Right, because obviously they didn't have to do anything to build the other 2 houses, rather than get a building permit, right?
Right, because those housing eligibilities already existed on that quarter.
We had, the 2 of them, we have to share a driveway. That was part of the deal of so I had my own, the next 2, that driveway that's.
Corey,
we share the driveway.
Corey, if we're going to talk, can we come up to the microphone, please?
So the house that's currently there and the next one, those 2 have to share a driveway. That was the agreement we had for getting those 2. I'm the one who made the sign. I wasn't aware that the eligibilities weren't there. Mike just said that there was that many, so I had the sign made. I jumped the gun. I'm sorry on that. Didn't mean to ruffle anybody up or get a million phone calls. But the driveways for the next 2 though, they are supposed to share a driveway. That was the agreements I had with that. So to clarify the driveway deal. And the sign, I can cut the sign in half.
But the process, if the building eligibilities then are transferred, and say they sell track 4, can whoever buys track 4 just come and get a building permit and build on it? Or where in the process does it become, if 2 houses already exist that won't likely be part of the subdivision, so at what point, I feel like they should come forward with the subdivision first if there's the Poppins addition, right? Like, and that's where I come back to the process, right? So, the concept plan, then the preliminary plan, then the final plan. If it's already been decided that there's going to be a subdivision, I feel like there should be some part of the process that gets us to, well, let's approve the subdivision. Now I understand there's the continuous land owned by the Poppins Family LLC that there is the ability, as it's currently written, to move them, but we're moving them into a predetermined subdivision. And because of that, that's what I struggle with, and that's what I think us as the commission should be concerned about. And you know, to the same sense, I think that's why initially like I plan to vote no, just because, you know, we're creating a subdivision without an approved subdivision. And it just seems like that's the intent of what's happening here. And until proven otherwise, I think that's where my mind's at.
Yeah, it'd be nice if the process was reversed. But unfortunately, it's not.
It would be, except for unfortunately, right now, we're just dealing with the transfer of eligibility.
Yeah.
So we have to deal with,
And he can't,
This
he really
part of
can't
it.
come forward with a subdivision plan until he's got
the eligibilities.
is the way I understand it.
So when we heard the subdivision last month, right, the additional subdivision, where it was 40 acres that they're gonna turn into, you know, 28 lots, right? It's not like there's 28 building eligibilities that we're moving on there. So at what point, if we have this piece of land that is going to become a subdivision, at what point do the building eligibilities matter anyway if eventually they're gonna turn into a subdivision and have 30 houses on it?
Because then you would have to do a rezone.
Rezone
Right.
Right.
to rural residential.
Yeah, this we'd leave it
Versus the
ag.
the minor plat
Right.
of a subdivision.
Right.
Right.
I just wanna make sure that, you know.
Can we make can we make the transfer,
Contingent?
what's her name?
Daisy?
Daisy. Can we make the transfer of the eligibilities contingent on the approval of the subdivision plan?
I am unsure, actually. I don't have my legal counsel next to me. But like you had said earlier, typically it's the burden of the landowner who is putting in the application if the subdivision would get turned down. It's just the burden of them to transfer them back if they wish to.
Because, yeah, some of those eligibilities then would just be sitting there.
Right.
So I think you're right, Mr. Green. I mean, he could, and I'm not 100% right on this, I don't know, but he could maybe build one house or even a second house, but then he couldn't get a subdivision, and then the other eligibilities would just be unused, I believe.
I had a question for Wendy. The other day when we talked.
Excuse me, Ed.
Oh.
I'm sorry, public input.
Am I butting in on you? I don't mean to be.
No, that's.
Well, the other day when Wendy and I,
Thank you,
what,
appreciate it.
the other day when Wendy and I talked, she said that they like to keep,
Wendy,
or didn't
do you
want
have a
these
question for-
eligibilities out in the country. They wanted to start by a rural subdivision or something.
Sir, thank you very much. We've already done public input, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, commissioners, any further discussion? More time to think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I vote in favor of it, it's not necessarily that I'm in favor of this whole process, currently, but I guess, you know, it's just back to the way things are right now. I guess it, in my opinion, checks the boxes, but I don't know that I would be 100% in favor of the subdivision plan, but that's for later discussion.
Yeah,
Yep.
I agree with you. I'm on the same.
And
page.
I hope people realize that if it passes, there's gonna be a bunch of houses getting built tomorrow. I mean, there's a whole process that we have to go through, another process to go through to get the subdivision approved, if I'm thinking about this right.
I believe so.
Well, just to clarify, Jerry, so like when we talk about the subdivision, and if the building eligibilities get transferred and we don't approve the subdivision plan, then can they just go each individually and
Right.
build, being there's eligibilities there, just like they did before, is, hey, there's an eligibility there, so we can just build each one at a time? How does that,
Because that's the concern I was trying to bring up is, at what point, if there's a building eligibility, do you not just have the ability to come down here and get a building permit and build on it?
Yeah.
yeah, that was
So-
what I wanted to get clarification on, is what would prevent them from moving those four over there? You know, and then if it doesn't go any farther than this, just to go and build however and whatever, as long as it meets the building permit requirements.
Daisy, could you help us with that? Do you have, what triggers that?
So number 2, under the staff findings, that any future splitting of the property within the receiving parcel shall first meet the requirements.
So,
So basically saying that it would have to meet the requirements of the subdivision before they'd be able to split the property.
so let's say they took the 4 housing eligibilities and moved them to the southwest corner of that quarter. Would that still fall under the subdivision rules?
Yes, because I believe
Okay.
that's 3 and or more.
On
So
the
they're all touching.
on the parcel, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
But if they weren't touching, if they would just move them to that quarter, then have, have a small break in there where they don't, where there's 100-foot break in between each one of them, then is that still, it's not a subdivision, they're not contiguous, they're not, in one plat, but they could go, like you said, put one in the southwest corner, put them close enough together, but yet not right next to each other, and still be on that same quarter-mile section.
I believe that's where the driveways wouldn't be approved. They wouldn't be able to have the plat approved because of the driveways if they're that close together and not touching.
Sure. I think if we go back to.
These public roads must be approved by the appropriate road authority.
But in order for it to be a subdivision, the plats all have to be touching.
I believe so.
New wrinkle.
New wrinkle.
And our other option is, we could table this until we're all for sure what we want.
Oh, gosh.
Or, we have the answers that we need.
Yeah, I think we got a lot.
Can we not,
There's-
can we not put in a condition on there? Of the building? I know that we have that any future splitting of the property within the receiving parcel shall first meet the requirements. Can we put in a condition that any future building on the parcels? Not just splitting, but any future building? Can we have something in there stating that?
Because then it says in there splitting, is that based off of the current owner, or could he sell off 10 acres and then that person would have a building eligibility and they could build on that and then they could, or is that what they mean by splitting? Is that he couldn't split part of that off and sell it, and then that wouldn't be part of?
I think it's on the parcels, it's not on who owns the
Okay,
parcels, it's
that's what
parcels themselves.
that's what the question was. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I've got more questions now. Would like to personally get some more clarification, and so, yeah. I'm half contemplating maybe tabling it and getting a few of these things figured out. I'd like to dig into the subdivision thing a little bit more and see what that all looks like.
If it is tabled, I will be present with my legal counsel at the next meeting.
That would be good. Okay.
Yep, sorry, a little late notice today.
No, that's fine. So I'm gonna make a motion that we table this, table the motion. Scott.
So there's already a motion on there to approve. I don't think you can motion on a motion.
No, we have to vote.
Well, we can table the motion. And then we just pick back up with the motion to approve.
We can make a motion to amend the motion from approval to a table,
Okay?
maybe?
I think you can do it either way, but I'll make a motion to amend the motion to table instead of approve. So now the motion should be
Think that works.
for tabling.
All right, we have a motion to amend the motion. Commissioners, we have a first.
Board members, Joe Meter, Deputy State's Attorney here on behalf of Bill Golden this week. And I would tell the commission at this point that you cannot table at this time. So
Okay.
that's just what I wanted to put out there.
One other thing. Should the motion fail, there is an appeal process that might be better suited for what we're taking on here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, to me, this is maybe one that the county commission, I mean, not to put our applicant in the bind, but I think our comprehensive plan does a good job laying out a lot of things, but then there's, it seems quagmires that show up with a lot of stuff too, so this might be something that might be fitted for that.
Well, without the, yeah, I mean, I'd like clarification if we transfer the eligibilities to the new property, do they have, and I think Daisy answered yes, but they basically have to be touching to become a subdivision, and as Colin suggested, if they split them apart 10 feet each, then it's not a subdivision anymore. Is that the way we're understanding it?
Daisy, you're not positive on that one, correct?
I am not 100% positive on that. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of subdivisions in Turner County, so I'm not as up to date on the subdivision plans.
So,
And Daisy, it's when there's more than 3 tracks?
I believe.
So the,
I
so the,
believe
so
so.
the 3 that are sold, they don't have to undergo the subdivision.
Correct, but if there was
Okay.
more than 3, then
If
they
there's
would need to.
More than 3.
So in the way I'm seeing everything, once we get these other ones over there, then that triggers a subdivision and there was no one-offs or not, because I believe that's per quarter. Could be wrong on that one, but
yeah, I don't know if we have an answer on that, do we?
But again, we need to remember that this is just about the eligibilities right now. That's what our vote is right now, is about the eligibilities, if it's within the rules, if it's within what we have on the books right now. That is what our focus needs to be tonight. Unfortunately, that's what our focus needs to be tonight.
But I think as as concern is,
Yes. Our concern is what could happen later.
if we approve these because it is consistent with the comprehensive plan, other than driveway approvals, what is to say that they can't just get a building permit and start building houses there? Like that's the concern.
and I think it is, the subdivision is triggered. We just don't know exactly what the trigger is. But from what we've been told, I mean, it does trigger everything, and that's, I think that's where it's at, where we can't just have 15 housing eligibilities in one corner. It triggers a, here we go.
Counselors, at this point, once again, Joe Meter, Deputy State's Attorney. I would direct you to section 204 of our subdivision plan, which describes what a minor plat is, and at that point, it, and I quote, "For the purpose of this section is to provide the timely review of minor plats." Or wait, I had this earlier. No, I'm wrong. One second. The main point being that, I guess, yes, it's section 204 subsection A1, it quotes, "A minor plat is a plat containing not more than 3 lots." So it would be triggered by the 3 or more, is my reading of that statute. So
But would the lots have to be touching?
that question I'm not aware of at this point. I would defer to the planning and zoning on something like that, I guess, at this point, so.
I believe they would have to be touching, because if you did not, let's just say you leave the 4 eligibilities where they're at, you could build 4 houses on that property wherever you wanted without a subdivision.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. I mean, if you transfer these eligibilities and you space them out along the road, I don't think it has to be I don't think it's subject to the subdivision then.
Then it's subject to the road district and allowing driveways and all that.
But, right, so you start talking about driveways, there's already been through whatever agreement, 2 houses agreed to have 1 driveway, so you start to have driveway come, and I understand we're talking about the transfer of building eligibilities, but you know, if you look at the proposed platting of these, you know, and you start to look at section 204A, because I've been trying to digest this as we've been here the last 45 minutes. You know, does not landlock or otherwise impair convenient ingress or egress. Well, track 6 is in the back of it with no frontage road access, right? So as you start to look at the landlocked, you know, and I understand these aren't to scale and it's not the plat, it's just the proposal. But you know, track 6 is in the back of it. I think in the way that, or maybe it's track 5, one of the two, depending on where the road is on the picture. But, you know, one of them is landlocked for sure. You know, I don't know if there's already agreeances on, you know, how those driveways would work if it's in the back behind another lot. Obviously, there's probably a plan out there somehow, but.
Yeah.
I'm still going off of right now, housing eligibility transfers. This meets the criteria for transferring a housing eligibility. That's where I'm at, or if it's subdivision or not subdivision, I guess our current rules then support or dissupport that. I mean, if they have, eligibility over here, eligibility over there, our rules allow or don't allow that. So we still have to follow our current rules, whether they're touching or they're not touching or whatnot. That's all set up in the rules there. But right now, we're talking about moving housing eligibilities. So, I mean, we follow our rules that are set wherever they are within the ordinance. You know, it gives the road districts their ability to approve or disapprove a driveway. It
Yeah,
gives the
but
county,
you know, what we heard from both townships, and both of them were in agreement that, from what I understood, was that they would both be in agreement of a frontage road. And so in a subdivision, you know, that's possible. Now, if we transfer the eligibilities and we space them out across that 1/4 mile, then frontage road doesn't exist. And then we put the townships in a position where then they have to deny the driveways, right? And the compromise to me seems like everybody's in agreement. If we would put these up there and then we could have a frontage road, I think it would work. So I don't know how we can do that and make sure that, you see where I'm going with that? Now, if it didn't pass, we can still make another motion, correct?
no, if we have a motion to approve, if we deny it, that's it.
Then they would be able to appeal to
To the commission.
I don't think is there appeal for this?
Yeah,
The commission.
Okay,
Right.
so there is an appeal,
Because all ours is a recommendation to the commission.
right. This and rezones, yep.
Right?
I don't know.
So, all right, any additional conversation, more thoughts? Again, I'm sticking with it checks the boxes, they can be moved. We have rules for subdivisions or whatnot that trigger from the move or not move.
that is
Okay, let's vote.
that's my thoughts as well. Mhm.
All right, we ready to roll call? All right. First, Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
No.
Commissioner Ensted,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
No.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Jungley is also a yes. So that is a pass. Great conversation, everyone. All right, with that, we'll ask staff, Mr. Brown, to come back in the room and he can talk about application number 2. Tough one.
Good job, Jerry.
I see everything.
Yeah. No, you did good.
I think they can. The lever though that's in place is the township doesn't have to give them a driveway. Which,
Commissioner Holder brought 2.
yeah. Wish we could have got more clarification from our attorneys.
Yeah.
Tell us, because if they can take it now and just spread the thing out, which isn't conducive to farming, you know, around those acreages, so I don't know that that's gonna necessarily happen. We can transfer the eligibilities and then put conditions on it, so the subdivision. But the fact that there might not be that they might be able to get a subdivision.
Excuse me. And Commissioner Hogan? All right, Mr. Brown, can we discuss application number 2?
Yeah, I do. Just, but I don't, just, because we have voted on a lot of them the same way.
Okay, thank you. This is item number 2 of the agenda this evening. This is an application from Alliance Communications. Property owner, this is South Dakota Parks and Wildlife Foundation. Location of this property is on the Spring Creek Golf Course, which is approximately 3 miles southeast of the city of Sioux Falls and approximately 3 miles northeast of the city of Harrisburg. Subject property, as you can see, is a 40-acre parcel. A portion of it is zoned commercial where the clubhouse is. A portion of it is zoned A1 agricultural, and a portion is zoned RC rec conservation. Parcel size is 10 acres, approximately 10 acres, 9.97 acres. These are some pictures of the subject property. Applicant is proposing to construct a fiber utility hut. We've approved one of these before. Essentially, this is for the expansion of internet service in the surrounding area there. This will be just to there's a utility building here. This is an access road for that, and this is 271st Street. And it's just to the south and to the east of that driveway access. So as part of the staff analysis, we did review the application with the ordinance requirements and standards. Staff did identify that this application is consistent with the zoning ordinance. and does, if contingent upon the following conditions that were placed in the staff analysis. With that, happy to answer any questions that you have for staff at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Commissioners, any questions for staff?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, at this time, I'll ask the applicant or the representative to come forward and speak on their application.
Good evening, Commission. I'm Andy Holscher with Alliance Communications, 612 3rd Street, Garrettson, South Dakota. Our telecommunications hut would serve an area pretty much straight north of Canton, all the way up to south of Schindler in that general area. So we would be, like, serve the areas of Lake Elvin and all the way over to Harrisburg with this communication hut. So
One question, could we approve it on contingent that you build one in Highland Township?
we're working on it.
Okay, just checking.
I do have a question. So to get your fiber to the proposed site right there, will it, do you need an easement or utility easement or anything to get it to the location?
So the terms of the lease that we have with the state has that built into it. So that's all part of that road right away, and then the easement to get in there along the road would be that part of that we had set up with first the golf course, and then that transfer of ownership moved to the state, and then the state approved that lease for that same amount of time.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions for the applicant? See none. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I'll ask anybody in favor of the application to come forward and speak. All right, seeing none. Anybody in opposition of the application come forward and speak? Seeing none, I'll close the floor to public comment, and I'll ask for a motion from the commission.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the conditional use permit.
Second, instead.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Commission, any discussion, conversation? Seeing none, I will do roll call. Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
and this is with the, I clarify before we go that far, with the conditions presented.
Yes.
So, yeah, motion and a second with the conditions. All right, I'm sorry. Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Ensted,
Yes.
Commissioner Green. Yes. Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Jungley is also a yes. There we go. All right, Mr. Brown, item number 3, please.
Okay, thank you. So this next item is an application for a conditional use permit for an oversized accessory building and then also stabling of horses on the property. So the applicant is Shelby Inman and the owners are Chris and Shalise Vinson. Location is about 0.74 miles east of the city of Lenox. Subject parcel is 9.97 acres in size. As you can see, the subject parcel is zoned rural residential, as is the adjoining parcel to the east. And if you recall, the reason we rezoned it to rural residential, not we, this was done before this board and myself, was to allow building eligibility on the property. So there would not have been a building eligibility on this property without the subject rezone. Proposal again is for a structure on the property, which will be located to the north of essentially the property, will be to the north and to the center of the property, which will be utilized for an accessory building over 1,500 square feet. It's about 1,632 square feet, and it's for the stabling of horses on the property. Little bit of reminder. I'm sorry, there's some noise in the background. There's some, as a reminder, in the rural residential district, you're not allowed to have agriculture on the property, so you can't have horses or any type of livestock on the property. So in order to enable that, we do allow stabling of horses by conditional use permit in that district. So staff did analyze the application, has been in contact with the applicant, and did identify that this application is consistent with the standards in the zoning ordinance, and identified that there would be 6 conditions for that request. The applicant, I believe, is out of, or the owner is out of state. The applicant works for the owner, and I believe that she's not going to be here as well tonight. And so I believe that Corey's going to help with that one. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have for staff at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Yep.
Commissioners, any questions for staff? So, Mr. Brown, as I understand it now, with this, basically they're building a shed. Because they're not allowed at this time livestock or whatnot.
It's a horse stable, yeah. And so it's an accessory building. So also in the rural residential district, any structure, accessory structure over 1,500 square feet does require a conditional use permit because of the rural residential zoning. But they're also proposing to use this building for a horse stable, which is also a conditional use in the rural residential district. But again, any rural residential zone property in the county is not allowed to have agriculture on the property or livestock on the property without a conditional use permit for the stabling of horses. Okay,
So those will be following this at some point, the conditional use?
it's both right now, tonight.
Oh, okay, that's all in
Yep.
here. I got,
Yep.
okay, sorry.
Yeah, it's combined, it's a combined conditional use permit request, yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, I ask the applicant or the representative to come forward, please.
You again?
Yep. Corey Grunwald, 27404 470th Avenue. And I'm just here on behalf of the property owners on it, on getting it switched over to the, getting the conditional use approved for their horses.
All right, commissioners,
their
any questions
first-
for the applicant?
These are their own personal horses?
Correct.
They're not stabling them for somebody else?
No, nope, they are all their personal horses.
Boarding, I
Yep,
guess you'd say.
yeah, they're not boarding other people's horses, they're trained, she just has, I wanna say it's like 6 horses, I think.
One question, Corey, do you ever think about maybe getting some legal behind your name, you know, every time you're up here in front of us and all that? I mean, you could ask additional fee, you know, for going through your building permits and all that?
It might come about here after a while here.
Commissioners, any other
You
questions
got
for the
any ideas what
applicant?
that could be?
No, I'm not, no. All right, thank you.
Stop using that driveway.
Okay, thank you, Corey.
Not a problem.
At this time, I will ask anybody in favor of the application come forward and speak. All right, seeing none, I'll ask anybody in opposition of the application come forward and speak.
Jerry Schelling, 46690 279th Street. We are the immediate next door neighbors. I don't know, can we both talk?
I'm sorry.
Can we both talk at the
both
same?
stay up here?
Stay up here?
Sure. yeah.
Okay. We're the immediate, the building is already there. I mean, they put it up, you know, ready. My concern is, first of all, we haven't seen any of this type of paperwork. You know, we're concerned about the odor, you know, that can be there, is the biggest thing. There is like a machine shed type, you know, that they'll say, you know, for, you know, like a Morton building that they put up, you know, already. It's got put up 2 weeks ago. And now, I think farming, we'd call that a loafing shed. And they've got that kind of connected to that, and that's where they can stable these horses outside. That's less than 150 feet from our property.
Facing our property.
It faces the back of our property. You know, I
Do you have
mean,
the picture?
you know, we've got a picture of what the
There's a-
building is.
There's a projector about where the mouse is right there. You can lay
Okay.
it there, and then the camera will show it on the screen.
We have to be smarter than that.
Oh,
Oh,
Okay,
how
sorry.
about that? That works.
perfect.
That's the site we see from our backyard. Lincoln County's gone through and, reappraised properties. I got a 38% increase in my property. Now I get this in the backyard. She has, these horses are, she's a professional barrel racer, or she's got the card to be a barrel racer. I don't know her, but I know that she is, a barrel racer. She's got two horses now. That loafing shed has got corrals there for 4. Are we going to have 2, 4? And when you see this, it says the IBOC edition, when you look at the conditional use permit. I was here 17 years ago when Tim Ibach, he came, and I thought he's had two housing eligibilities. There was going to be a house possibly in the backyard. Well, now he built the house in the front yard, and we're going to have this in our backyard. I have no problem, if that'd be a house, because we live out in the country. I mean, there are things we do in the country, that I couldn't do if I was in Lennox. That's why I'm in the country. If I wanted to shoot clay pigeons off my backyard, I can. I can't do that with 2 horses that are valued at over $100,000 apiece. I would think that somebody would have been here before. The fence was put up, the tree grove was taken down, 2 buildings were put up,
Aren't they supposed to get the permit before they put up the building? Isn't that
Isn't the
typically how it happens?
Isn't that
Am I
isn't that the
incorrect?
reason why we come in and say, I want to build a building?
We do have a permit.
But
You had a building permit?
Excuse me, everything up here.
Oh,
for me,
sorry,
please.
sorry.
Yeah.
They have a building
But
permit?
I mean, some of this should have been visited with the neighbors, before, they get a building permit, because when we initially moved out there, we've been out there for 35 years. There's like 6 of us have been out there for that length of time. And we moved a manufactured house out there. We had to get a permission from all the neighbors to move a manufactured house out there, providing that within 3 years we're gonna build. And we did. That corner used to be, long time ago, it was a 40 acres called the Johnson Tract. And then when Tim built his house, and he called this the IBOC, and I believe, because I was at the meeting then, 17 years ago, he could have put a house in the front, could have put a house in the back, would have to put a frontage road. Well, he put his house where Shelby's house is gonna be. It's right on the gravel road, so he kind of landlocked that land back there. But for the last,
But it
we've been,
was- but it
all
was-
these years, it's been a cornfield, soybean field.
And it's been zoned for residential. So I don't think horse stables are residential.
I mean, if, I'm looking at what, that deal that you've got as far as odor control or something like that, we're concerned about that. And we're concerned about,
Resale of our
That-
property
yeah.
having, and another thing too, if Shelby moves from there, their last facility that they had, that land that they had their horses on, turned into a livestock,
good,
raising 50 to 100 head of cattle.
she's
So-
got a great area. What's to stop a local farmer buying that property, saying, wow, this is a perfect place for me to raise feeder cattle. I've got this great fence. The property that they owned 10 years ago or so, that's what that property is being used for. It's a mile north of Worthing, and that property right now has got feeder cattle in.
How long have you folks lived out? How long have you folks lived here?
35. Well, we built the house, our house burned down in 89, and we built a new house in 90, but we were out there for four years before that period of time. So this really disrupts everything that we've been out there for the last 30 years.
Well, the whole
Or more.
community, but another thing too, that it doesn't show where that is. There's a lot of land there, and they chose to take the lot and put the buildings really close to our property, where our house is. They could have gone way to the back
Or to
or
the west.
towards their area.
To the west of that
and put
property.
it that way, but basically the horses are gonna be in our backyard instead of their backyard. So I don't know how they got this building permit just to say, I'm getting a building permit for a residential area and build a barn? So how did they do that?
I mean, we can build a barn. I mean, the same way I have a machine shed. I, came in, got a, you can put a machine shed any place on your property. But that's a
But-
machine shed. But now we put a horse stable on,
In a residential zoned area?
How long have the horses been there?
huh?
How long have the horses been
She
there?
must, what, she's got,
They're by I saw something by
she's
their
got two
house.
horses now, but she's only been in that property for 6 weeks, maybe?
Yeah.
This is brandy new.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll ask staff those questions after public input, about building permits and all that.
You know,
Do you
To
guys
get
have any
you-
livestock?
chickens.
Got a few chickens.
Then, and we have eggs though. Now, I know,
No one else
Listen-
has livestock in
Li-
there because it's a residential
li-
area.
listening to, and I know, I heard something about driveways, you don't have any input or something like driveways, but they had to extend the driveway out to make the road to get back there. And the culvert is a 4-inch piece of plastic pipe, is what they put in underneath this driveway. I just don't believe that a 4-inch piece of plastic pipe is adequate for the culvert for a driveway.
Okay, thank you.
So-
We'll ask those questions. All right, anybody else in opposition of the application? All right, seeing none, I'll close the floor to public input. I'll ask for a motion, and then we can ask staff and others some of these questions.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve for discussion.
All right, we have one motion to approve.
Assuming that's approved with the conditions.
With the conditions, yes, I apologize.
Second, Green.
All right, we have a motion, a second with the conditions. All right, who wants to go first?
I would like to know did they have a building permit?
Mr. Brown?
Yes, they have a building permit for an accessory building, not for a stable, which is what would be approved tonight.
Okay.
Now, again, the benefit of having a public hearing is we hear from the neighbors.
Right.
And so now as part of your analysis, you have to determine if this is appropriate for the area. And so we made it clear to the applicant that it was no guarantee that the stable would be approved. So that's part of your condition. And so if there is concern amongst the board, that's something that could be denied if you feel the conditions aren't there. Or you can add additional conditions to hopefully, that would make the situation, agreeable with the neighbors. But what I would say again too is that, again, no livestock's allowed, no chickens, no goats, no nothing in a rural residential district. And so the only thing that is allowed is horses if there is an approved stable permit in that district.
In the 1,632 foot square foot building, that's suffice, or is that above what's typically,
That's average, yeah.
what's that?
That's average size, yeah.
Okay, I thought there was something with 1,500.
Yes, so what's permitted is 1,500 square feet. So as
Okay.
part of the condition, you would approve the oversized building as well.
So is the current building permit that you've approved?
1,500, yeah.
And that's what the building is right
Well,
now?
Well, we'll have to look at that. But the other issue is the loafing sheds. The loafing sheds that were built out there, those are below a building permit threshold. So those did not require a building permit.
But we don't know for sure if.
I don't know what from the picture what was there or not, so.
But the current building, we don't know if that's 1,500 or bigger.
Well, my understanding is 1,500, but we'll have to investigate that, so, yeah. But, so that's up to you if you approve it tonight or not approve it tonight.
With the density of houses that are in that area within the county, how many different approved horse stabling operations do we have in an area of that density? Is it common? Is it uncommon?
This particular area is, I mean, there's agricultural around here that has different livestock and things like that. This one, I don't believe we've ever had one that was this type of a situation. We have approved them of what I would call a true rural residential
Right.
development. Yeah, there's probably at least one that I can think of by Lake Alvin that we've approved within the last few years.
I remember that. I remember her getting horses.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I just want to clarify a question, Toby. But by measures of our planning and zoning as requirements and our comprehensive plan, the staff analysis is that it meets that.
Yes, as conditioned, but, you know, based on what I've heard tonight is that you might want to put a limit on the number of horses. There would be an additional condition that you could add.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question for Corey, if you'd come back up.
Gonna clarify that it's Reeves Building, not Morton Buildings, though.
Yeah.
So the current building that's there, is it 1,500 square feet or is it 1,632?
I would honestly have to check the plans.
Well, or is it gonna be, are you planning on putting an addition onto it?
If it gets, I believe it's right at the 1,500 mark, if it's approved, we're gonna put, I think there's another section that goes on it to make it, to get her to where they want the 1623, I think it is,
32.
or whichever is on there.
But you don't know for sure, you built the building?
I did build it.
Yeah.
I can look on the plans.
Okay.
I, not off the top of my head, I'll be
I guess
honest.
I have a problem with that if if we just go ahead and build a building bigger than what it's required for and then ask for forgiveness, or, you know, ask permission later.
Know what's easier?
What's that?
It's easier to ask for
Yeah.
forgiveness and permission.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
But I will say that one caught me off guard, so I apologize for that.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Do we know how many acres this parcel sits on?
What's that?
Do we know how many acres this parcel is?
9 point something.
Thank you.
And Toby, just to clarify, if it was approved, I mean, down the road, you couldn't put cows in there, feeder cattle, or anything like that. It's just for, the condition would be just for horses, correct?
That's the only thing allowed, correct?
And we could add a condition to limit the number of horses.
Yep.
Yes.
Which I think would be a good idea.
Can I say something?
Mr. Chairman, she would like to know she can say something.
Could I say something?
Uh,
Oh, if not, no.
If there's a particular question, otherwise input's already been done, but if there's a particular question for this couple, we could. If anybody has a question. All right, commissioners, any additional conversation?
What about fly control? Can we put something in there about fly control, like controlling the fly? I mean, is there gonna be an issue with flies out there with the horses and manure and, if the neighbors are so close?
There is, we could add to it, condition number 5, no indication of offensive noise, odor, smoke, dust, glare.
So is there any specific fencing requirements that they have at all, Toby, based on when we go through and if you approve something like this? Are there fencing regulations as far as making sure that they don't get on your property and make sure that it's...
There's zero standards. It's just it has to be private horses is the only standard that's in the ordinance.
You know, they couldn't board horses or other
Right.
people's or
Yeah,
make a
it's not
profit.
specified, no commercial.
Right.
But is there, like with the fencing, is it, you know, like in some of these, you know, when we, you know, for, you know, the barriers, well, is it, you know, is it just a barbed wire fence, or is it required to have some type of paneled fence up there so it kind of blocks the?
Yeah, and apparently there's no standard, so.
Yeah.
And then how do you determine, you know, I guess if you put a condition on number of horses, right, what's a horse density that is, you know,
And then my question would be with that is that can be on there, or is that permanent ones where if somebody comes to town and they have, you know, she's a barrel racer and her friend comes to town and they got 4 there for a weekend and they're only able to have 2. You know, what's the, you know, is it 2 permanent ones, or is it 2 total, or whatever number we choose? That's a maximum, or is there, or if she has,
I wouldn't think that.
has a colt or something that, you know, would.
I wouldn't think that would get to the level of commercial, though, if a friend had some horses there, you know, but, you know, having a colt, I think you start to have a little bit different conversation. You know, like,
I was told by the applicant that they were 2, but Corey stated 6, so I believe you could put a limit at 6. If they want to exceed that, they would have to submit a request to amend the conditional use permit.
Well, that's a big difference between 2 and 6, you know, I guess I've,
Yeah.
you know.
Or we could do it at, is that what the applicant asked you? Toby was 2?
That's what I was told, yes.
so you could do it at 2 and a condition at 2, and if they decide they want more, they can come back to increase their conditional use.
Do they have to go through this process then?
They would.
Are they be notified?
Yes.
Conditional use, you would be notified, yeah.
Thank you.
Question for Toby. All right, Toby? So if this is approved, and basically the approval would come for the larger building, and you go out and look at it, and that was done, you know, it was built before it was approved, what's the repercussion for that, or what happens?
We'll
or-
fine them.
Do you?
Yep.
Okay.
And if you don't approve it, they'll have to tear it down.
Interesting.
We've done it before.
Okay.
It's not often enough, though.
Not often enough, no.
And to be clear, you would have to tear it down to 1,500 square feet, right? So if it was 1,630, you'd have to take 5 feet or 10 feet off of it or whatever to make it a complete structure at under 1,500.
Yes. Yep.
I think the bigger question, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
Is the discussion of something that is that is allowed through a CUP to go into rural residential areas. This was heavily debated, some time ago about whether horses are a commercial outfit or if they're a pet, or whatever the activity is. It's not much different than people that have a few chickens, unfortunately, as it was deemed at that time. I think if they're respectful, they take care of their animals, it won't be an issue. But I think that's the case on any situation. Whether they have dogs, they may not take care of them, then that's not gonna work. So I think a lot of the discretion will be is, you give them the opportunity to do what they say they're gonna do, and then have the enforcement backbone to go and enforce it if they don't. So I would encourage this board, given it meets the requirements based on staff analysis, set that number, whether it's 2, 3, or 4, and then give them an opportunity to operate. And if they fail to be a good neighbor, you have the ability to take it back. It's not easy to do it, I mean, because people don't like to say no to people, but that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, if we do set the limit, myself, I mean, I probably wouldn't say less than 4, just for me, just, you got that much property and you do the horses for a living, you know, I'd say 4, but.
Even if they have 4, Mr. Chairman, if they don't take care of them,
Right.
it's not gonna matter if it's 1 or 4 if they don't take care of them, but if they could have 15 and maybe take care of them wonderfully too. I'm not saying 15, I'm saying 4 probably is a logical number.
So, Mr. Chairman, I do have, so procedurally, we have a motion to approve with the conditions as stated. If, and this maybe goes to the deputy state's attorney, if we then had this conversation and have a stipulation different than the motion, you know, are we not just are we just not voting on either yes or no based on the motion as it's been made?
You would, if I may, correct me if I'm wrong, counsel, but on the procedurals, it would be a motion to amend the motion, adding the condition,
Correct, Commissioner.
and then you would vote on that, and then the whole motion after that.
Okay.
All right, commissioners, any further discussion?
I would offer a motion to amend to, because you have a motion on the floor. yes?
Correct.
Motion to amend to limit the number to 4.
I'll second Green.
All right, motion and a second. Any other discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. I'll do roll call on the amendment to change condition number.
It's a,
Or what, add
it'd be
additional
additional.
Add additional
Add it?
commission, or, yes, limit to 4.
But I know there was some discussion about adding to number 5 about the flight control. Was that still being considered, or is that?
We could vote on this amendment, and then if there's another amendment that would come forward, we could
Okay.
do that with flies, or whomever would want. All right, so this roll call is to amend it to limit the horses to 4 horses. Yes is to approve, no is to deny. Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Ensted,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins,
Yes.
and Commissioner Jungling is also a yes. So now we're going amendment, add amendment number 7 to limit this to 4 horses. All right, now we have the original on the floor unless there's another amendment.
Excuse me. I'd like to amend that number 5 to make sure that we add that fly control, especially being so close to the neighbors.
I'll second the motion just for clarity, though. It's that their plan must include some fly control. We're not
Yes.
specifying what it is, it's
No,
just,
just to make sure.
they have to.
Yes.
Just so they understand they need to clarify that.
Yes.
All right, thank you. My second stands.
Okay, motion a second to add fly control to number 5. Any additional conversation?
I think fly control on 4 horses is like trying to control pigeons or sparrows. I guess, I think it's
If they
a
throw
little,
us-
I think it's a little little too much.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's hard for us to enforce is the problem that's gonna be. So it's
Okay.
country, flies come no matter what. I don't think that, as long as they indicate they've done something,
Right.
I think that's what the intent is.
Right.
It's not that they can't,
Right.
not to have any flies, they just have to show some effort to,
Try and
control
control
some.
them.
So,
All right, we have amendment to item number 5. Any additional conversation? All right, I'll do roll call. Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
No.
Commissioner Ensted,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
No.
Commissioner Poppins,
yes.
and Commissioner Jungling's a no. All right, so that does,
Mr.
We,
Do I
we
get to
skip-
vote?
You skipped one, Eric.
oh, I'm sorry, it's my fault. Commissioner Scott,
No.
That fails.
all right.
Perfect.
It's having a
So the-
Scott Green and a Commissioner Scott, I think, is what throws you. Like,
Oh,
you
there
got
it
2
went.
Scotts right there back to back.
Yep. All right, so that motion failed. So now we have the original motion to approve the conditional use permit with amending it to add number 7 for 4-horse limit.
Mr. Chairman, please call the question.
Yes.
Call the question. Have the vote.
Yes, yep, you guys are ready. Okay. I didn't know we were going to add any other conversation, just want to make sure we're good. Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Ensted,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Poppins.
Yes.
Commissioner Jungley is also a yes. All right, thank you, everybody. We are now on to new business. So Toby, will you give us a brief rundown of the of the public input we're going to go to?
Yeah, so this was an item that was requested to be placed on the agenda last month for a work session. And was pointed out at that meeting that the townships had their meetings and while it wasn't a public input session. And so you requested that we place it on the agenda for a public input. I did send a letter, albeit it might have been late, but we did send a letter to every single township official in the county and asked them to provide input. I guess an answer to that is I don't have any direction from you guys yet what it is that you want to do. So I didn't specifically ask the townships to really, say, are you for building eligibility transfers? Or are you against building eligibility transfers? The purpose of this is really just to gain input on the topic and not to lead it in any way. Because certainly I don't have any recommendation for you what you should do with building eligibility transfers. I know that it's become a controversial topic as of late, and so it's created a lot of public angst, I guess. And so one of the things to do is, of course, we can initiate amendments to the ordinance at the direction of the Board of Commissioners. So at some point in time, we'd have to come up with consensus amongst this group, and then seek consensus from the commission if they would want to proceed with some type of an amendment. But at this time, I don't know what that would be at this time. And so I won't go through the long background that I gave you last month, but I'll go through a really quick one. That, again, zoning was adopted in Lincoln County in 1971, right around that time frame. And at that time, you could obtain a building permit for a single-family dwelling in the agricultural district if you had possession of an acre and came into the office. And at that time, it was what we called the $5 permit. You would essentially get a building permit. And then I believe somewhere between 1971 and 1995, and we know the issues that are out there, there was a lot of subdivisions that prematurely developed that didn't go through the proper vetting, the proper procedures to do those. Much like I talked tonight about the previous item about how in the rural residential district you can't have agriculture, but in a subdivision that's an agricultural, you can have agriculture. So we have issues now where people, live in what they think is a subdivision, but it's not, it's agricultural zone property. But what I would say, they probably recognized in 1995 that they had a growing concern with some of these developments occurring. And so in 1995, they adopted density zoning, and density zoning was not new to the neighbor to the north. And the neighbor to the north obtained it from Minnesota. That's where the concept originated. But the concept of density zoning is that you restricted residential development to 1 per quarter. And so people say, well, okay, that means you got, there's 4. And the reality is there's not, because at the same time, we essentially grandfathered in any plat or any property that was, had a parcel at that time. And so a lot of people say, again, there's 5 or there's 6 or something like that. But again, this was a way to control the growth and the development of the county was through this process. In 1995, at the time, there was an ability to transfer building eligibility, but it was limited to within a section. And then in 2009, when the county adopted the current zoning ordinance, it changed to the current one, which is contiguous under the same ownership, which essentially means that as long as the controlling party has ownership over the adjoining property, they could transfer it as far as they could. There is no restriction on it. There's no restriction on townships. There is no restrictions to that effect. And so that's basically the background of kind of where we're at now with density zoning. And so I know there's a lot of concern over the transfer of it. I don't think there's any concern. It's the right thing to do. It's landowner rights to have the 1 per quarter. Where the challenge is, and what I think is always interesting, is that we've rezoned rural residential property a number of times over the years. And not once did we ever have any concern about those ones. And that totally circumvented the building eligibility process because it created more eligibilities than what was granted by right to the landowners of Lincoln County. But in saying that, but I also want to kind of address a couple other issues too, is I think, and we did send letters to all the townships, and I did talk to a number of them on the phone, encourage them to come tonight to provide you input. They're the ones that are directly impacted by these decisions. Our office, the county board, the planning commission, we have no jurisdiction over access, over roads, over township roads. That's solely with the townships. And so there's two parts to that process. The first being when a property is platted, the plat requires by state law that there would be a signature by the appropriate road authority on there. Our office doesn't entertain those. We require that the minute the plat is filed in our office, that it has to have the township signature on the plat before we entertain it. And so, and that's become a very big issue with adjoining townships, because we don't have any record in our office of we have record of who owns, where the property ownership is, where the township resides, but we have nothing in our office that shows these gentlemen's agreements that the townships have with each other about who maintains the roadways. That's something that I really love to work on. I mean, we should have a record of that in our office so we know what those are. But in saying that, the townships have sole jurisdiction over that. And so they're the ones that have to approve the driveway permits. They're the ones that decide what types of improvements need to be made for those driveway improvements. Not the county, not our office, not you as the planning commission. Those decisions are made separate of all those decisions. And so that's, one issue I want to address. The other is that the subdivision ordinance requires so subdivision is split into two lots, but in the ordinance, we have a provision for a minor plat. And a minor plat is to allow the transfer of ownership and to allow minor development of property. And that requirement is that any plat that's filed in our office that's greater than 3 lots, it does trigger a subdivision plan. Or if there's an easement that's required with that plat, that as well would trigger it. So again, the threshold is greater than 3 for a subdivision plan. But with that.
Do they have to be touching?
No, the plat.
No.
A plat. When
What's
the
that?
plat's filed, if there's 3 on it or more than 3, then it triggers the subdivision plan.
So once you divide off, so if you've got 160 acres and you divide off 4, 5, or 3 pieces or 4 pieces, and they could be in different parts of that 160 acres, that would trigger the subdivision?
No,
No.
and that's a flaw.
What's that?
That's a flaw. Because essentially what it is that if they come in, they could come in our office every week with one plat after another, right? That's the flaw.
So I mean, technically, we could transfer 10 eligibilities to one piece of ground, and as long as they aren't, you could just continue to build them as housing eligibilities and they wouldn't be part of the subdivision plan.
They could continue to plat them, it wouldn't trigger a subdivision plan.
And what?
They could
And it would
plat them,
not.
it would not trigger a subdivision plan, yes.
Right.
And that's something that we need to look at, yeah. But with that, tonight is public comment, public input on building eligibility transfers. Again, we sent letters to every township official, gave them no direction because I don't have any direction what you guys want me to do at this time, other than we want to talk about it and then gain direction.
I think that's what people want to do, is they just want to talk, give
Yep.
their opinions, ask questions, and
Yep.
see if we can find a direction to go.
Yep. Any
If
questions for
any
me?
at all.
Yeah, I agree. We have our thoughts on it as a board, but, I mean, it affects all the
Yep.
landowners and all that, so that's who we want to hear from.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
All right, with that, we have public input. Anybody who'd like to come forward and speak on the subject of building eligibility transfers or building eligibilities in general, please come forward. I do have a letter to read. I'll throw that out at some point. No, go ahead. You're already up. Oh, I don't want, too many steps. Just-
Anthony James Ventura, 47763 292nd Street, Hudson, South Dakota, 57034. When you guys gave the landowners and stripped them of all their other housing eligibilities and gave them 4, it's supposed to be a lot of record which is protected. And so that should be from the property line. The other thing is you've monetized these. So Lincoln County has given a monetized right to these citizens. And so when you're talking about stopping a transfer or an eligibility or bringing it somewhere else, you're restricting their rights. And so it's almost like a zoning issue, but it's almost like the red line zoning that the government used to do in the 50s towards people and citizens. So I encourage you to look at it maybe protecting from the property rights. And I also say once that is sold, then that 40 acres loses that lot of record for measurement. So that's one way to protect the family farms that are generational, 160 acres with 4 parcels. But you've given us 4 parcels to build on. We don't need to be a subdivision, and I don't find that as a loophole. I find that as a gift that has been given by the commissioners. And so to take that back, you should pay the citizens and refund them all that money, which is about, what, $150,000 right now, Mike Poppins, for eligibility? Yeah, so, I mean, we'll take that in cash. But I mean, that's the problem, is you've created a right for the citizens, and you have to respect that. And the other thing is, you gotta look at your 2005 to 2025 ordinance. It states very specifically how the progression is supposed to go. And so, you're not supposed to have subdivisions till the city's supposed to take it over. The more the county grows, the more you're supposed to build 4 houses per quarter. And so, we're not following the guidelines, and you're not respecting that ag is supposed to be shrinking and we're supposed to be adding more things. You can have lots of housing and lots of ag and work jointly together and find ways to make things work. But it has to be in harmony. It can't be in chaos like it is now. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, sorry, a couple notes here. Anybody else would like to speak on the subject of housing eligibilities?
I'm Arlen Hagen. My address is 28418 467th Avenue in Lincoln County. In Grant Township, I'm on the Grant Township Board, as is Bill Beck, who's with me. I got this letter this afternoon at 4 o'clock about the meeting tonight. Bill gets the mail a little earlier than I do, and he called me and asked if I knew about it. I said, I don't know anything about it. And I don't know whose fault that is, but I don't think you can expect public input from the township. Normally, I wouldn't open my mail probably about right now. So I don't think that you can call this public input on a hearing like this. A couple other things, just comments. From what I've heard going on tonight, I've never been to one of these meetings before. But it seems like they're maybe treading thin ice when you're permitting things or passing things, when you're not very many definite answers that I'm hearing, or people who know what is really going on. For one thing, we have a quarter in Grant Township that has 5 housing eligibilities on it. It has 1 house, 40 acres is separated off in different ownership, has 1 eligibility. The remaining acres was allowed 3 housing eligibilities this year, and they've been sold. And driveways are in. They're on a county road, so the township wasn't contacted at all. We asked that question, and planning and zoning said they knew about it, but they had some answer for how that could happen. But Mike, I guess I didn't come prepared to make any comments, but I think you have to give due notice to the townships if you want to have some input from them. Because we are beginning to work on a plan. If this happens, in my case, we've got 4 contiguous quarters. We could transfer 16 housing eligibilities along Highway 18 or on one of the township roads, whatever we would choose, from what I hear. And if we separate them by a little bit, we've checked the box. So that's all my comments. I don't think you want to consider this a public input or the last time you want to have public input, because my guess is most of the township boards don't know anything about it. I certainly didn't get a call. I don't know who did get called, but that's my comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Arlen. Marlon. Excuse me, Marlon? Arlen, sorry, Arlen. Do you have could you come back up? I've got a question for you, please. Do you have a recommendation I know you weren't 100% prepared, but that one, you said there's 5 housing eligibilities there. Would you have a suggestion for us of how to?
Well, I don't know how that could happen. For one thing, there's 40 acres taken off that quarter. Another acreage is 10 acres off, so that's 30 off 160, that's 130 left. You can't get, 40 off, you got me flustered here. 50 acres off 160, leaves 110 acres
was allowed 3 housing eligibilities.
Okay.
What do you guys feel? I mean, just as a township of the concentration of housing eligibility, I mean, do you feel it puts a strain on your township
Well,
infrastructure?
it does.
or-
We've decided, we've just started talking about this as a township board because the county has some stipulations on driveway spacing from corners and distance between driveways and so forth. And, of course, that's generally for a blacktop highway, which would not necessarily have to be the same numbers as we would have to use on a gravel road because the speeds are different, speed limits, speed traveled is different speed. So I can't say we've got any recommendations right now, but.
But you're talking about it.
We're
and
talking
you-
about it,
you
yeah,
see
and
it.
I wouldn't want to stand up here and say that I'm representing the townships in Lincoln County.
No, right,
But-
yeah, yeah.
but it's
But
definitely
as far
a
as Grant
concern.
Township goes, it's definitely a
Right,
conversation.
and we've got, and not anywhere, I'm sure northern part of the township is a lot worse, like La Valley, than what we are in Grant, but there's probably 10 or 12 new houses in Grant Township in the last probably 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And a bunch more if you go back 5 years.
Yep.
So it's a problem, it's gonna be a problem. And I've just recommend that, you can see I've been around a little while, that you make sure you got your regulations set before you pass things that you wish you hadn't.
Right.
I think Arlen, what was intended by this is just to start the conversation.
Yeah.
Nothing, no actions coming from this,
Yeah.
other than to carry on conversation. Identify if there is a reason that needs to go into further discussion, if there are problems that townships believe need to get addressed, because it hasn't. Fortunately, an application came in that stirred some comment. Before, we probably wouldn't spend 2 minutes on a building eligibility move. So that is one good thing that has come out of this. We've got townships, that are willing to now come up and say, hey, we've got some things that we gotta talk about. So there's gonna have to be, if this committee decides through, and with staff to send it back to the commission, because it'll end up having to come from the commissioners to direct that we change the rules, and then we'd ask this board and staff to work through it and find out what needs to get changed and how we should change it. So that's kind of, I anticipate what the intent was, is just to stir the question to see if there is enough interest in making some changes to some of the rules. So,
Yeah.
nothing formal by this letter.
No.
It was just an invitation,
Yep.
come and chat, not a formality by any means, so.
I just wanted to make sure that you can't put in the minutes that said the townships had their chance to make recommendations.
Right.
No,
because
but we
that's
can put
not
in the
the
minutes that
case.
you said you've been here around a little while.
Well, and I don't think that, this probably isn't the last public discussion either. I mean,
no.
depending on where we go with it, I mean, I think this is definitely something that needs to get a lot of thought put into it. And so we
Yeah.
sure appreciate you coming and
And I think,
apologize about the late notice, for sure.
good communications if you want township input, good communication ahead of time, and maybe some discussion topics or something that the township should be looking at before even they come together to talk with you.
Absolutely,
Would be
yeah.
Yeah, I think in the past, it's been pretty restrictive to do any rezoning of property to increase density. Like you indicated, with your 4 quarters, you could commingle those to a point. There is no limit. Maybe there needs to be a limit. And some of those are the questions that have to get answered, because it's been around long enough. It hasn't been a problem in the past, but we can see that with the growth that we've seen in just the last few years, it can become a problem if we don't look at some of the issues that have,
Right.
come to light, so.
I get along with my neighbors now, but I might not if I did that.
Well, and out of respect for the townships, I'm also I'm on Highland Township's board, and so I understand that. And one of the things, just me personally as a township member, think is backwards, and I understand that it's the way it is right now, but the way this goes currently is the township's the last people to know. And the way they had been finding out was when somebody shows up and wants you to sign off on their driveways. And we've encouraged Toby's, the office, that they've been, on these housing eligibility transfers now, they've been notifying the townships ahead of time, and so that they have a little more input on that. And I think that's something that we have to take into consideration. I've talked to people from Dayton Township and Lynn Township, and those are two very fast-growing townships in our county, and they're really struggling with this. I mean, from an infrastructure standpoint, and you know, I've had some nice conversations with people, and I said, you know, I'm not against continually doing what we're doing, but we got to find a lever, we got to find a solution so that the townships don't go broke trying to maintain the roads for these folks. You know, and I don't know what that solution is, but hopefully we can figure it out.
And
Could you
again, I think that,
elaborate- Oh, go ahead.
I think another reason why we need to be very diligent not to rezone property that isn't serviced at a minimum by a hard surface road, that is not maintained by a township. Their resources are extremely limited as the county's resources are, they're even more restricted. But again, we go back to what Tony had talked about these 1 per 40. Right or wrong, it actually limited, because it was unlimited prior to that, and now we limited them, and they definitely have a value. And I'm sure there's not a single property owner that says, hey, let's get rid of them, because now they've, especially in the last couple of years, realized what the heck they're worth. But that doesn't mean that we don't have the ability to try to guide them. They won't fall under the same density issues as far as a rural subdivision, nor should they, because they are individual property rights. The intent, I don't know if it was clarified, when it went from one section to another section or adjacent, was to actually enhance the ability to protect better farmland. The intent was try to commingle them into an area that was less conducive to agriculture, if possible. If that happens, there's no checks and balances to say for sure that happens or not, but I believe that was part of the intent. Instead of having 4 pieces spread across that whole thing, and then you're trying to spray and till around them, give the property owner the ability to commingle them and make it easier to farm. You know, they're not forced to sell them by any means, but somebody buys the property later. But the point being is there's a lot of things coming, things are changing. We don't do things like we did 10 years ago. We definitely don't do things that we did 20 years ago. And the townships now, as growth is coming, the responsibility to be part of the discussion is to also then get us kind of a preset checklist in their own way of what does that driveway have to be, what other conditions or issues have to be raised and looked at, and be prepared. Because too many times over the recent past, questions get answered and there's no way of answering because they hadn't had that opportunity to think about it. Now we're asking, let's think about it so we can be prepared when somebody comes in for something. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, any,
Oh, I interrupted. He had something to say. I'm sorry.
oh, I'm sorry, Colin.
No, I was just asking from the township of, when they talk about access to the roads, like it says on the last one here, number 5, by the appropriate granting entity for access onto a public road. So is there a certain, and I know there's a distance setback from the intersections, but is there, you know, where they have to be so far apart, or, you know, on these township roads, or is it from, do all the townships have the same requirements? It's just based off that township, for that specific road?
Based off the individual townships, correct. And that's one place we need to start too, is, you know, if you go to Dayton Township as they're growing, they've, you know, what I understand, they've put in La Valley, I believe, has to like a driveway permitting process. They've adopted the Lincoln County Highway Department's driveway process. We haven't done that at Highland, and I talked to the folks at Lynn, they haven't done that. But those are things maybe at a township level that need to happen, and these conversations need to be happened at that levels. And then once, hopefully, they get the things set how they want them in their townships, then they can communicate that back to Mr. Brown's office, so that when somebody comes in and wants to do that, they can say, well, this is what the township's gonna require you to wanna do. And that might be different in Highland Township than it is in Springdale, you know? And that's the beauty of the townships, they don't have to all do the same thing.
So we do require, before we issue a building permit, that started the first of the year, is that we don't issue a building permit until we get authorization from the township. Like Commissioner Scott said, is that there's some that are more informal than other townships. There are some townships that say, hey, go fly a kite, you know, you're not gonna tell us what to do, but no, we're not gonna issue building permits until we get some verbal. I'd rather see it in writing from the township. Some are still giving us verbal, but we do need it in writing as far as access has been given to that. But when you're transferring eligibility, we have no location where they're at. It's not till it's platted until we know where the location is. So at that time, that's when the townships sign off on the plat, and they would look at it and see that. But that doesn't circumvent the townships, and they still should have a driveway access permit in addition to that locational permit or locational sign off that they're giving on the plats.
So if that happens to be on the line between two townships, do both approve, or is it the township that maintains that road, or is it the one that they would potentially be building on? Like if it was on the east or west side of the road, like how's that, who's the approver if it's on a line?
It doesn't work well.
Right.
And as we've seen tonight, and this is, you know, so, and they're all different, but in a lot of townships, the agreement would be is, you know, where you adjoin, you either take every other mile, or maybe you take 3 and the other township takes 3. Well, then if we transfer eligibilities from one township to the next, but the other township has the road, they're responsible for the road, that comes out of their money, but they don't get the tax revenue.
Right.
You see, so it puts them at a disadvantage that way as well.
And then they fight. So then we have one that, you know, that they refuse to sign, so the other one signed it. Well, you know, that puts us in a predicament where it's, what are we supposed to do? And then we're trying to facilitate development with the landowner.
Yeah.
And the landowners, you know, quite frankly, these people that are building aren't familiar with townships at all, right? You know, so they're not familiar with the governmental structure, so
Corey's starting to be.
Yeah. So, but those are issues that, yeah, and the buck stops with me on the notice. We sent it out after we posted the agenda, and we didn't get that. But like I said, if there's any townships that have any comments, still submit to our office. We'll forward them on. And then the other part about it is that yes, there's no action tonight. Any action would require public hearings and those types of things. But if anything, I'm proud that we've engaged the townships, because that's something that we need to do. This is critically important to them and to us as partners in this thing. And communication, what I'll say, communication is critical to everything you do in government. But with townships, it's a little difficult because there's there's people, right? You know, there's officers in the township, there's a clerk, there's all these people. Sometimes we find it difficult, like who are we supposed to communicate with at a level 2, and then, you know, because a lot of it's verbal. A lot of the communication we have with the townships is strictly verbal, which in today's age in Lincoln County, that doesn't work. I mean, we need documentation. You know, there's legalities to this stuff, so.
All right, with that, I'll read this letter, and then we'll ask for more public input for anyone that's here. We're gonna listen to you. But Marlene Sweeter sent this Monday, April 18th at 3:50 PM. Please read for public discussion at tonight's meeting. Lynn Township Board Lynn Township Board is supportive of limiting the transfer of housing eligibilities from one quarter to another. With too many houses on 1 mile, there are many concerns regarding dust, speed, road conditions due to the extra traffic. It is a challenge for the township to keep up with maintenance of the roads with only one part-time employee to run the road grader. It also causes additional financial stress on the township to keep up with the maintenance of the roads. Thank you. All right, any other public input on housing eligibilities? Yes.
What's that? Uh-oh, come along for the ride. My name is Galen Smet. I live at 27386 471st Avenue, Harrisburg, South Dakota. My question is like the clarity between subdivision and your eligibilities. I mean, they say after 3, you're a subdivision, but every quarter has 4. So technically, every quarter is going to be a subdivision. I mean, the way I understand it, the way it's read.
If I may.
Yep.
Yep.
Mr. Thomas.
Unfortunately, I've served here, and a lot of people agree with that too long, so I've probably read this thing a few dozen times. So when we talk about commingling of those eligibilities, if we move all 4 of them into the same vicinity, and touching is the determination, and even if we move them all at once, if we move them one at a time, it doesn't strike the subdivision plan. I think it's a flaw that we do need to look at and clarify so that we don't have that situation. I don't think anybody that I've been aware of has abused that situation currently. But there is a loophole in it. But the intent was if someone took those 4, stuck them all in the same spot, in essence, then it would be strike that it needs to follow the subdivision requirements. Although it's not a rural subdivision, it is still have the guidelines because they get condensed. So it is one of the things I think that would need to be clarified if we open up the discussion on moving of eligibilities. So is that clear enough?
So, yeah, no.
So,
So,
Galen,
yes and no.
Basically, if they're not touching those
It's
plats.
not even
then-
that.
Then, yeah, those 4.
Yeah.
It's not even that, if they do it one at a time.
If they do it one at a time, or if they do them all at once and they're not touching, then it is not considered.
So if they
subdivision.
move, like, for instance, the case where we're moving
Yeah.
4, so does that is.
If I put them
subdivision?
all in that same spot, that would strike the requirement. So now if I scattered them across the Valley 7, then it wouldn't. And if I moved, now if I move one at a time and platted that, it wouldn't. So I think that circumvents what the intent was, but there is a loophole in there, and I recognize that, and it needs to get addressed.
But technically, if you were to move all 4 and just plat them individually,
It still doesn't.
it still doesn't meet the,
No.
meet the test.
You still
Yeah.
won't be
Right.
sub.
No.
So then there's 3 already, so those are at the max then.
In that spot, yeah. Now, again, I could even, if I moved one, it still wouldn't. If I moved and platted only one, or if my family decided to plat one, it's still in it. So there's still a loophole in there.
Correct.
Yeah, so we recognize that, and that's one of the things, and Mr. Huffman here a month ago brought up the fact about moving from one township into another township. I think that probably merits some discussion because of the valuations that get shifted.
Correct.
So there's several things that I think in discussion that will come up that need to have very good merit to discuss, and may need to get brought into a new rule guidelines.
Yes.
But up until now, I don't know, I haven't been aware of anybody that has abused it, but there is a loophole there, so.
Yeah.
That's the
Because
reason
like
for
you,
this. Yeah.
like there too, if you scatter 8 houses out across the quarter, like for future development, if you look ahead into the future, here you've got that 160 acres and you got houses scattered out all over it versus,
Yeah, that's the intent of why they don't allow them to commingle, so you could still
Yeah.
farm the rest of that farmland.
But I think
Right.
what Galen's saying, and I agree with you, is, as our municipalities grow out into these things, right? I
Exactly.
mean, it starts to, whether they're all up on one corner or they're scattered around a quarter, it could create problems for the municipalities and how
Right,
they're gonna
correct.
handle it. Mr. Brown shared a map, I think it was the south side of T last month, and you're probably familiar with it up there. I mean, there's just some things that happened, and now it's making it really tough for T.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I might not see it, but in
Yep.
20 years from now, that could be
Yeah,
the
that's-
city of Sioux Falls and you got, whatever.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure there isn't a single landowner in that area that wants to give up their eligibilities.
No.
No,
So,
no, they don't.
Now, the one thing I do think is how does it work with housing eligibilities if you fall under that jurisdictional area of T and Harrisburg? Do you have to go through them
it'd be their site.
to build a house,
No, we'd still get a permit, but the plating jurisdiction falls under that municipality.
It does.
So, yep.
Yeah, again,
Beyond.
we're mixing, so there are 2 different ordinances. There's zoning, which is the eligibility, the right to build a house, and then there's the subdivision, which governs the plating. So some people don't even plat. I mean, they do legal, you can do a meets and bounds description or something like that. And so,
But I
yes,
wonder
if
if those.
it falls in the subdivision authority of the municipalities, they govern the subdivision process.
Right.
Correct.
But I wonder if we don't need to have that conversation with, over so many building eligibilities and subdivisions and how that
Well,
looks.
even if it's a single eligibility and single plat, the municipality has jurisdiction then.
If you're in that, yes.
Yeah, so
Yep.
they are automatically involved in that
Right.
discussion, so.
Yep.
Well, if you want to talk about communication, they're involved before we are, and we don't even know it. So we get a building permit coming to our office. We don't even know that they platted it.
From the municipalities.
Correct.
So there's a broken chain continuously.
Correct.
Of communication, because we have several different government entities, townships, counties, cities. And then you throw in, HOA that's, for a rural subdivision. There's so many different levels, and trying to get them all to communicate is very difficult. That's where I encourage, if townships can get to that point of having a preset guideline and or rules. Okay, sorry, I'll cut off quick. That way, it's a difficult process to get to that, but as we find out what are the issues that have to get discussed and known, how often should you be allowing a driveway on a mile? How many, how does that, you have guidelines on how to build a driveway, but some of those things, if there's too much slope and for visibility, you can't allow. It takes a lot of process, but if you can get through that, it will simplify and make it equitable for everybody, when people do apply for such. But it will streamline, instead of, I think, unfortunately, right now, a lot of the times on a township, driveway is, there's a lot of confusion, especially if we're talking about one township to another. A lot of that has to get decided and clearer, and so
Yeah.
that when somebody comes in to apply, we can say, yep, we know who it is they need to talk to, and to start the process, and is it gonna have to go through a township's board? Or do you have a supervisor or the clerk or whoever that can say, yes, it meets all the criteria, so here's your permit?
Correct.
And know all
Yeah,
that.
that would, if you had it down to
Yep,
whatever.
Checklist.
Like yours,
Yeah.
yep, exactly.
and if it doesn't, if there's a gray area, then it probably needs to go to.
the board.
The board,
Yeah.
so, but.
Okay.
Well, and I'll throw out another topic that I was thinking about too that I didn't mention too is, and so we don't have jurisdiction over the access to the lots. But if a township did decide to say, no, we want like an access road or something in there, well, that would trigger our subdivision ordinance, and our subdivision ordinance requires that road be paved. So now you're talking about to access off of a gravel township road onto a paved road, that we're gonna have to make sure that it gets built to that. And you have all kinds of issues with culverts and runoff and there's a long debate or discussion that needs to take place when this type of development's gonna occur and how we're gonna handle it, because it's gonna be complicated. And plus, it triggers a subdivision. Some people might say, well, everybody should do a subdivision plan. A subdivision plan is an engineered plan. They typically require, as you're aware of, the only time, I can't recall that we've ever done a subdivision plan for a building eligibility combination transfer. We've only done them for proposed subdivisions, rural residential, commercial, industrial development parks. And so with this, you'd have to hire an engineer, a drainage engineer. You're talking $10,000, $12,000 of total engineering costs, more than likely. Plus counties review of that as well. So our staff has to review that as well as our professional consultants too.
So let me just clarify this. So if we have somebody who brings in eligibilities, a bunch of we'll just use the Poppins edition. If we have the township comes in and says, nope, I want you to have a paved access, that automatically triggers the subdivision rules?
If they required a private easement for that.
If the township does, then that would automatically trigger our subdivision.
Correct.
Okay.
Even if they weren't adjoining?
Correct. But more than likely, it would be a private road that they would say that we're only going to, more than likely, I don't want to speak for the townships.
Right.
But they would, in my mind, the township would say, we're only going to give you one access. And I relate to this with our highway superintendent. Our highway superintendent has guidelines for access spacing and things like that. And this isn't something that he made up. This is standard, safety standards that are in place for that. But he typically requires there be one access point for that. And so we typically try to get 2 access points for safety, emergency management, and things like that.
Right.
But at that time, if the township said 1 access point, then it would trigger a private road, some type of a access road into there. And then our subdivision ordinance would require that be a private road and that it be paved.
Okay.
And glad you brought that up too, because I talked to the highway department, and one of the, correct me if I'm wrong, but they basically went to how many driveways per mile? And it's somewhere between 5 and 7, depending on the traffic density of those roads. And so if there's 10 building eligibilities in that mile, they're forcing them to start to share. Is that how you understand it?
We look at it's a case by case basis, but one other thing that which I don't want to put words in the township, but the county's starting to require access management studies. So we require the developer, which is the developer, to secure an engineer, and they would do a traffic impact study.
Yep.
And is really when we're looking at some of these, it's probably something the township should look at too.
Well, just for clarity on that comment, it's typically on situations where there's going to be business traffic or a substantial rural subdivision that's going to impact the area substantially. I don't,
30 houses or something like that.
Yeah, where they're, onto a road that makes a huge impact. If you've got, and I'm gonna use my example here, my family's 2 properties, those eligibilities are all there. It's not creating more housing eligibilities. It's shifting them by a half a mile from one parcel, at most a half mile from one parcel to another. And they could still, even without moving them, still be all off the same road. So again, it could be case by case. It may merit, and I don't know if it's just strictly gonna be a staff discretion or how that will work, but if there deems that there's a safety issue and it needs to get evaluated, then it probably should get evaluated. We've done that on a couple situations. I can think of, on Louise Avenue, there was a situation, a substantial change in traffic was going to impact that road, so a study needed to be done to see if a approach in, approach out needed to be added. On Klondike, there was one, and we are utilizing that more and more. And it is an extremely useful tool because we're impacting, and not to say people don't drive 100 miles on a gravel road. So any township supervisor knows that people drive 100 miles an hour on the road, on the gravel road, whether or not. But traffic on the highway typically is higher and the speeds are faster. But there may be a situation that, especially if there's going to be a situation where there's a change of use to commercial onto a township road, I believe that merits having to have an evaluation. So.
Yeah, to clarify, I don't have any jurisdiction over it.
Yep.
The highway superintendent has it over the county roads, the state has it over the state roads, the townships have it at the township roads. But I would recommend, and I do recommend, that any change of use should have a traffic impact study, especially for speed and especially for safety concerns with them.
Yeah, and that's the way it was explained to me today when I talked to those guys, is that the reason to limit the approaches coming out onto the county highways from a safety standpoint. So instead of having to watch 15 driveways in a mile, there's 5, right? And so instead of 15 cars coming out at once, maybe there's only a chance for 5.
Yep.
All right, any other public input that would like to speak on this one?
I'm gonna make the sheriff give me a speeding ticket next time he sees me. We're gonna keep going here, but, he
Corey,
probably wants to go home.
We do your name
Oh,
and all
sorry.
that official stuff.
So, I don't know how to.
You still gotta say your name.
Corey Gronwald. But
Address.
I build all over the county, and it seems like I have the most troubles in Lincoln County with approvals and how things go. I'm asking, have you guys ever reached out to different counties? I mean, I'm gonna point out Dan Kessler's Minnehaha County. There's a process, he's got it black and white, you turn everything in, and Dan tells you what you kinda need to do. I'm not here trying to Ashley guys, there's just a lot of gray areas. I think that Lincoln County's growing, it's starting to get to that point to where, it's growing a little bit faster than anticipated. And I just didn't know if there's ways to reach out to another county or like to ask, I'm gonna put Dan Kessler on the spot. As much as I don't like the guy as an inspector, knows his stuff and everything's black and white. And you go in there, you file your building permit, and it seems like I don't have the issues we have as we do in Lincoln County. And I'm not saying no one's doing their job. I'm just saying, is there any way we could communicate maybe with a bigger county or something to maybe help improve Lincoln County?
Oh, Corey, I think you're stepping in and stuff. I think we're very proud of making it not easy. We are growing, so a lot of things that we have to discuss is because we're growing and changing drastically and quickly. Not to say that, and forgive me for taking the mic, but this is one thing I am proud, that it isn't easy.
Well, no, I'm not saying like easy, just like the steps they have. Like it's black and white on what you do.
I do agree with you
and
that.
how you do it.
So, and that's what we were when we were discussing with the townships, as they become more and more involved, they can't just say, yep, we want to be part of it without having rules developed.
Right. And that's what I'm asking,
And I want to warn townships, the more rules you have, the longer your meetings get. And the more controversy that comes with it.
I'm not trying to like talk down,
It's-
just saying,
it's just
is there a way to,
simplified.
see if other counties have a better system in place to help us improve our system?
I think everything's on the table right now, yeah.
So, like like I said, I'm not trying to talk down, but that's just my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you, Corey. Any other public input on this topic?
Galen Lems, Canton, South Dakota. Wow, my head is spinning right now. So I just had a few comments. Basically, I'm in support for really not making any changes, but I'm just listening to the last conversations going on here for a while, and anyway, I'm just smiling inside that the townships are like, you need to come to me before you build a house, and the planning and zoning is like, you need to come to me before you can build a house, and the county commission saying, you need to come to me before you can build a house. And then a city comes along with a big marker and draws this huge circle around their city and said, you're all out too. We get to decide. And the landowner's going, I think I have a loophole. So it's pretty sad if the only way that you can get something done is to find a loophole. And if it comes to that, if government has that much control over individuals where if they have to find a loophole to try to use their land that they own, then we're operating under some other countries' rules. So anyway, it just kind of struck me as we were going through all of these different scenarios of how everyone needs to have their say in what the individual landowners get to do with their land. So anyway, just a couple comments on the eligibilities. Again, I'd be in support of not making a lot of changes. The rule's been in place for quite some time, and land has been bought and sold based on these rules. I think you said since 2009 is when the last changes were made. And there's significant value in these eligibilities that people own with their land. And changes, just keep in mind that changes will have negative consequences on the land value if you do make changes to limit them. I mean, those are going to be real dollars for landowners at stake. And land is bought and sold for a lot of different reasons. So I'm coming at it from an ag standpoint. Most farmers, if they're going to buy land, they don't want to sell their eligibilities. They want to farm their land. And unfortunately, right now, you might be a farmer that has been waiting a lifetime for that piece of land across the road to come for sale. And now it comes for sale. Well, I think Tony used the figure 150,000. I'd say if you're buying farmland right now, that, you know, an eligibility might raise the land value by 300,000. And so if you're a farmer, you might buy that land because you want to farm it, but that asset is in that dollar value that you just paid for that land. And more than likely, a farmer's not going to sell, but he has that option, and he purchased it. It's a real asset that he has. If times got tough, you know, maybe they need to sell those eligibilities, but instead of putting them right next to their feedlot or farmyard, you know, they might want to move them to the back 40 in that section that they just bought. And again, you know, I've heard it time and time again tonight. I think communication's a big thing. You know, if getting out and talking to the neighbors ahead of time would take care of, hopefully take care of a lot of problems up front. Just a couple positives for moving eligibilities. It saves ag land. If you can cluster those homes together, you can create some big spaces to farm. I know if you're farming and you just plop them here and there around a section, now if you want to spray your crops, you know, you're paying attention to wind direction, and all of a sudden, if you've got them spread out around the section, you know, it's pretty hard to pick a day where the wind's not blowing some direction here in South Dakota. So I think it saves ag land by clustering houses together. Probably less conflict with the right to farm issues. I mean, if you raise livestock, you're spraying, you know, if you've got dust and noise, those types of things are easier to mitigate if there's more houses in one area instead of trying to please everyone spread out around the section. And as far as the townships, I'm not on a township board, but I do know that, you know, it can be a struggle if you get new houses out in the country and those people work in town and you get a snowstorm and they're on the phone, hey, I'm snowed in, I got to get to work. And you might have 3 or 4 miles of road to clear to get all those people out of there, where if you had them clustered in one area, you clear one road and you just made a whole bunch of people happy. You know, and it kind of goes both ways too. I can see, I'd never thought of that before, transferring an eligibility out of a township to another, you may lose some tax revenue. But some townships might argue that I'd rather lose a few tax dollars than it costs me more to take care of the road than the revenue I lost in tax dollars. So anyway, it'd be my request that you wouldn't make any changes. I think if you take a case-by-case situation and weigh them, I think the process has been working pretty well so far. So thank you very much.
Galen, thank you. Just to clarify, you're 100% aware that we're not trying to take away anybody's housing eligibility,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
okay.
I know. It's
Just
the-
part of that, I got the sense that maybe you thought part of this discussion was that of removing them, the
No.
current ones that are there, and that's not, I just want everybody to be aware that that's not
Yep.
part of the discussion.
But I do believe that there's, I've got added value here now because I could get some additional building eligibilities. I'd still want to farm that piece of ground, but if I could move them to another, location on that piece and kind of put them together so I didn't take up all my farming acres.
Sure.
Farming.
Yeah, and I think it'd be interesting to look into that and see what, if there is added value to clustering them and on one piece of ground versus having 4 on 2 pieces of ground across the road from each other or something, it'd be interesting to see what that looks like. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because you can argue that the same way the other way, is that maybe the people that are buying the housing eligibilities don't want to be the 9th house in the line. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that can go both ways. I
Yeah.
think, but- Thank
And
you, I appreciate it.
I don't have all the answers either.
Yeah, no,
You got
no,
a tough
no.
job, but anyway, I appreciate your time and listening, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brett Merkel, 47236 274th Street. I want to commend you. I don't envy your jobs. It's a very difficult job. I can tell you, I've been moving eligibilities and buying land since the 1995 was probably the first